Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talk Advocacy to me. We're so excited to have yet another episode with another thinker in the customer advocacy space here with us, Lauren Turner. Here on Talk Advocacy to me, we always discuss one question of interest to hopefully many of our listeners here, and we have a good one, and I think one that's been talked about a lot recently. Whether openly or behind closed doors. But this should be a really great discussion with Lauren. And that question today is, why should companies invest in experienced talent for community management? As always, I have my co-host here with me today, Deena Zenyk, co-founder
Hola.
of Captivate Collective. And we are just thrilled to have Lauren with us. Lauren is obsessed with being customer driven and customer led, and engaging that customer on a deeper level. Uh, and we were just talking about this, right? A lot of that is listening to that voice of the customer, understanding how to operationalize it, and knowing how that can bring value to the organization. You have won multiple awards, as I see. You are a CMA 100 lister here. You've had 3 BAMI awards. That's pretty impressive, including Program of the Year. And you have an extensive background in leading and launching advocacy programs. So really, it's our privilege to have you with us here today, Lauren. And I know that you're like particularly just passionate about the subject of why leaders should be investing more in this practice, but why we're going to discuss today too why they may not be as well, and go back and forth on how to look at this. So just as we open up here, Lauren, why don't you tell everyone hello, and then tell us why this topic is just of particular interest to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the intro, Liz and Deena. It's great to be here. And the reason this is a passionate thing for me is because customer advocacy and marketing is a small group. We all know each other.
Yeah.
And everyone knows each other. It's musical chairs when it comes to different CMA folks in different SaaS companies running these programs. And I've just, over the last couple of years, seen so many incredibly talented, highly strategic folks end up losing their jobs. Not only in some cases seeing the entire function go away, which is happening a lot as well, but almost as often what will happen is these very experienced leaders end up being replaced with someone with half of their experience, usually as a cost saving measure by the company. And then you'll have these less experienced folks running the community, and you give it 6 months, and in almost every single one of these cases, the community has either stagnated or just overall failed. And I'm so concerned about the discipline of customer marketing and advocacy continuing to grow and thrive. And when these communities end up collapsing, I think it's very easy for folks who just weren't part of that entire process to look at that and wrongly conclude, oh, advocacy doesn't work. And it's not that advocacy doesn't work, it's that the program wasn't resourced properly in order to really be able to take off and grow. And so if you can stem that from the beginning by having someone who really has that experience to go cross-functionally and do all these very highly strategic parts of running a community, you're going to be much more likely to have that community success. You'll be able to grow it, you'll be able to scale it, and you will eventually, over time, with that growth, be able to see your renewals, your upsells, and your cross sells, and all of those major financial metrics that are so important holistically to your company. But it takes a strategic person not only to connect the dots between the tactical activities that take place within a community and the overall goals of the company, but to be able to really work cross-functionally to get all those hands on deck involved in the community's success and the investment in its growth. And by that, I mean, when I was running communities, probably about 40% of the time that I spent was actually internal evangelism. It was approaching the leadership from the product department and saying, hey, what I want to offer as an exclusive to the people in the community is an Ask Me Anything meeting with you, so they can get a sneak peek into the roadmap. I want 10 minutes of your time in your departmental meeting so I can keep everyone in your department up to speed of what's happening in this community, where the gaps are, and where there are opportunities where you can either do a deep dive with customers to get that feedback for your next product feature iteration, but also to be able to hear directly from them what that user experience is like. And
Mhm.
what typically happens when you have someone who doesn't have that experience is they don't have the confidence to approach these folks without basically going through approval because they don't want to ruffle any feathers, but to also be able to have the gravitas to get those folks high up the chain in these other functions to be able to go along with what needs to be done. And it's sad because you can have some incredibly charismatic folks who, just because of their position in the hierarchy in the company, aren't seen with the same kind of importance to be able to get things done as someone who might have that higher title and therefore more leverage to be able to bring some of these folks on board and to make sure that they personally have skin in the game in the success of the community.
Yeah, Lauren, I'm tracking with you here, and I totally agree with everything that you're saying. Having more experienced people in roles should, lead to more success. So what is it that we need to do to come back to your original point here about experienced people being let go, because of this numbers game?
Mhm.
How do we how do we kind of show the value of what these more experienced people are doing so that they're not the first to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that there's a magic bullet, but it's not a quick fix. What makes communities thrive is that relationship that's being built not only on an account level, but on a personal level with folks from that account. And that's not something that you can just flip a switch and get instant advocacy from. It takes time. And when you're working under a culture where everything is being measured quarter by quarter, you want those immediate results. And it just doesn't work that way with a community. When communities work really well, it's when the executive leadership gives it time to grow and thrive and to really set the foundation of having that success work within the community. So, for example, when I was building communities, I always started with a pilot program of somewhere between 20 and 50 people. And these were folks that I would show the community to before it was fully baked, usually when it was around 70% of the way built. So that way they could see what we've built so far, give feedback on what they like, what they don't like, what's going to compel them to keep coming back, and then build the remaining 30% of that community with them on board. So that's how you know that there's a there. So that way, when you eventually open up your community to a broader audience, you know that there's going to be compelling enough content in order to keep customers there, because basically you get one shot at getting it right. If someone jumps into their community and they don't find something that's going to click with them, they're gone. And all that energy that you've put into recruiting people is going to get wasted if they don't come back. And it often takes someone who is a little bit more experienced to be able to push back on the executive leadership who want that instant gratification to say, look, yeah, we can invite our entire database on day one, but if they don't find something compelling and they're gone, then basically you're stuck. What we really need to do is to be able to do this very thoughtfully and very strategically, with customers being present every step of the way to be able to give their feedback and help build it with you. That's going to take time.
Yeah, and build in those quick wins as well right out of the gate so that you have that runway to yeah, I was just talking to someone this morning and I said, like, how do you truly measure nurture as it relates to the bottom line when you're just getting started? Like, it is a longer play. It takes time to start to see the results of those bigger kind of arcs of activity
Mhm.
in customer advocacy. So oftentimes when we're working with our clients and we're developing strategies, we say, okay, like here's the big strategy, but what are those quick wins out of the gate? To kind of feed that appetite of the executives. And really, you said it perfectly there, Lauren, that like we're just kind of when it comes to measurements and metrics now, it's almost like an instant gratification. Like show us the results of what's happening. But when it comes to relationships and relationship-based plays, those take time.
Yeah.
Well, and do you think though that this could be everything's a pendulum, right? And we had a nice long leeway when community and advocacy programs were coming to the forefront, where we were given a little more leeway on the relationship side, and then I think the pendulum swung to, okay, but are all of these programs really producing outcomes and value for the organization? And probably in some cases they weren't, right? Like,
Yeah.
just to be honest. But I think it's probably the savviness. And I think this role is really just evolving as we figure out what needs to take place. Because not only do you need, Lauren, you were describing a lot of what a senior person might bring to the table, which is savviness of how to create relationship, how to get internal buy-in. And Deena, you're describing savviness around knowing that I need to produce some storytelling elements to even get that buy-in quickly from the organization. And now we're moving into an area where some of that savviness now even comes in. I need to know the technology. I need to know how I can, as an individual, amplify myself using all this new tech that is out and have a vision for that. Oh, and by the way, I also need to be a wonderful communicator, because communicating with clients on a daily basis. It is such a mixture of high level vision and execution and communication. We often call these roles somewhat of a unicorn role, because how possible do we really think it is to find all that expertise in one person?
Yep, absolutely. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. Hold on just a second.
It's okay. It's real cash over here.
Lauren's dogs are making my dog bark. So.
Well, and I didn't know if it was your dogs or Lauren's dogs.
No,
So I don't know whose dogs it is.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
It was mine. Yeah, troublemaker.
No problem, Lauren. I saw your face was just going like, do I answer this or do I stop?
Delivery going on right now.
We were just talking about
how many dogs does Lauren have?
Well, for the podcast recording, we might need to edit that.
See, as you can tell, Flash and Molly are very passionate about community and advocacy, and they are contributing to the conversation in the language that they know.
Oh goodness, that's too funny. We don't mind it at all, Lauren. Please don't even worry about it. We just very go with the flow. I guess my point is too, and I think it plays into Lauren's point, which someone who has a skill set in order to even be thinking at that level of all the aspects from internal buy-in to measurements and outcome to technology and vision for that is probably not a junior role. So what is it that, I'm sure leadership understands that to some degree, right? Do they understand like what do you think, Lauren? Like, is it just a lack of understanding? Is there a gap in the lack of understanding?
I think to a large part there is a gap in understanding. Most marketing leaders, and customer advocacy usually fits under the marketing umbrella, sometimes under customer success, but I've seen more often marketing than not. Those marketing leaders are usually coming from either a demand generation or a product marketing background, which to a large extent is still demand generation. So their frame of reference is that top of funnel conversion, and it's all about money in, money out, and what happens with that process. And that through line doesn't really work in relationship-based disciplines. And so sometimes it's really just having that basic understanding of, okay, this is different. We're not going to, for example, put out a challenge in our community that says, buy $10,000 worth of software as an upsell, and customers are going to be like, oh, I'll do that challenge for points. Like, it doesn't work that way. You're not going to have a fantastic webinar for your customers, showing them your new feature showcase, and then have them be like, that's great, hand me a contract. And so it's that mindset that we need to really have people understand that these relationship based disciplines work a little bit differently. You're creating this more organic ecosystem that is going to help your customers in the long run be more successful, better understand your product, and have a personal connection to your company that is going to last more than just their role in their current company. I've seen in previous roles more than $4 million of upsell happen because someone in the community who was our top performer in our community took a new job somewhere else and recognized they were leaving. They were cashing out on all their rewards when they typically didn't, which is something that someone who's experienced would recognize. Oh, here's a red flag. This is an opportunity to follow up with that customer and see what's going on. To see that they're taking a new job and then seed that as a warm lead for their new role, and then bring the package with them. If someone misses those signs, you're not only missing that amazing opportunity, but you've basically completely lost contact with that person because they will have already been gone by the time you recognize that they've left. And so it's all about kind of having your finger on the pulse of customers, connecting with them as human beings in a way that gets them feeling passionate about your company. Because realistically, at the end of the day, if the only connection that they have to your product is as a tool for them to get what they need done, and they don't see the bigger picture of being part of something and really feeling cared for, it's always just going to be a tool. And that tool can be easily replaced with a different, cheaper tool. You can't replace a relationship nearly as easily. And we know that despite putting on paper the reasons why people will buy a product, they'll say, okay, well, these are the checklist of features that we need, and they have to have all those things. Ultimately, it's going to be a lizard brain gut decision to a large extent because you just like the people you were working with. and that is a big part of what is going to keep accounts renewing with your company. It's not just because you have a great product that they like to use that's going to help them achieve their goals. It's because they like working with you.
But Lauren, you and I have talked about this, and it's like, okay, I mean, leaders will always be looking at that higher value, and you're talking to a higher value, which in time leads to a monetary value for the organization. And obviously, if the organization or that leader was seeing that type of a return on investment, I believe, I mean, speaking as a leader, I would be like, hey, that is absolutely something we need to keep doing, keep investing in. We're not going to mess with that. That is too valuable. So where is the disconnect in this? Like, are we as advocacy and community practitioners, are we just not given enough time to get to that value? Are we not showcasing that value? What do we think might be happening? But I will say, like, or do they just not quite see as much value, so they're just putting their eggs in another basket? What do you think?
I think a big part of it is impatience. That, when you're a company that is in crunch time and you need to hit certain revenue goals, you don't necessarily have the luxury to wait for that long-term outcome of these relationships that will come in time. So yeah, they're not necessarily given enough time. But also, if the programs are under-resourced to start with, you're already basically building something that's crippled from the ground up. And so even those short-term quick wins, like your reviews and your referrals and and your testimonials and things, you're not going to get that in the volume if you're setting up your community with transactional relationships in mind. And by that, I mean setting up a community so that way every activity is basically, how can you promote us? What can you do for us? How can you say great things about my company and help get us to the next level? You need that mutual exchange of value in order to have your community be compelling for your customers to keep coming back. And so if you're looking at building that community with purely that transactional mindset of, okay, we're building this community solely for the function of upsell and cross-sell, you're not delivering value for your customers to get to those results. You need to put in as much as you get out in order for your customers to feel the value and to feel valued as humans and as customers. And that is not something that you can just flip a switch and have it happen instantly. And it's hard to hear. I get it. I mean, everyone is trying to scramble for every last dollar, and it's tough, but that is really what's needed in order for these communities to grow.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we believe in the equal exchange of value as being kind of a must-have for any collaborative program, for sure. And we do think it's a good point. I like what you brought up of these programs are and practices are often under-resourced because there isn't, X equals Y exact straight function to them. So when leaders are assigning dollars, if they don't have that vision or that understanding of a long-term value from this, or maybe they haven't been told properly what the long-term value from this will be, they will assign maybe a minimal amount of resources because we all just kind of inherently believe in the value of connection and having our customers connected to our brand and having somewhere where they can talk to us. People are mostly bought into that. Funding to a larger degree, right? Yes, I can see where, okay, that becomes a little more scary because it's not a quick return on investment. So dollars might go elsewhere. But of course, there's a lot of that value, stories like you were saying about, 4 million coming from return customers who had left and gone to other organizations and that being new revenue. Those are wonderful stories. I wonder if we're hearing about those stories very often or enough, and that we need to be telling those more often and more clearly for people in leadership who typically do, like you said, Lauren, come from other practices other than customer advocacy and community engagement, because we're still so young and immature as a practice that most of the highest leaders in marketing have a background in more traditional marketing functions. So you will lean into your most familiar function and you will revert to that type of thinking. So it does create, and I think we've known this for a long time, most of the people in customer community and advocacy tend to sit somewhere in the middle, and they're really like have this natural passion for this practice, and they're trying to engage their customers in new and innovative ways, but they're also trying to sell that vision a layer above at the exact same time, which in essence creates a very difficult role in general.
Absolutely. And when this role, as it often is limited to one person or is siloed, then the accomplishments that take place within those programs, unless that person is really comfortable saying on a Slack channel to the whole company, "Hey everyone, look what I did. Here's what this customer said." And I've done that a lot. Basically saying, here's the quote of the day. Here's what we're pulling from a case study that we just got. If that person in that role is not comfortable enough tooting their own horn of their program, no one's going to know the accomplishment even happened. And you can see that going back to that new contract coming in from a customer who left to another job, right? If that person goes to another job and in their new role, they bring on your company, if that customer marketer doesn't speak up and say, yeah, oh, that's Jane. She was one of my top advocates and she brought us with it. Sales is going to get all the credit. Because as far as they know, Jane's just coming in because of a Google search and now they're signed up for the company and yay, sales.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is, partially at the core of the issue here, because to your statement, yes, some of the credit should go to sales, but also a lot of the credit should go to a product, because if Jane didn't actually see value in the product that she was using, then she probably wouldn't be in the advocacy program or an advocate for the company to begin with. And I think that to bring this conversation back is one of the core problems, that the metrics in customer advocacy aren't our own. It's very difficult to measure the success end to end of the value that the CMA professional drives for the business. The metrics are shared. We have, attribution for the success that we drive, and we're just a piece of it. We're just a cog in the overall customer experience and customer journey machine. And it is wild that 15 years later we're still having the same conversation about how to show the value back to the business. We obviously haven't cracked the nut on how to really position ourselves well, because we have seen a lot of really talented people lose their jobs as soon as that kind of purse string tightening starts to happen. I wish that I had a kind of magic bullet answer, but I don't. But I do. Again, one of the key issues here that we have to contend with is that shared nature of our success. Whereas a salesperson, they're out kind of hunting for leads. They see that through. They sell it, and they kind of own most of that. Maybe the customer has touched some content along the way, or some virtual spaces along the way, but for the work that we do, there isn't a ton in the work that we do that we own that success end to end.
Yeah. One of the things that I found to be really helpful, even if it's not real dollars that you can put on a balance sheet, is before I set up communities, I basically put together this laundry list of all the different advocacy activities. And I get alignment with the executive leadership to assign a dollar value to that act of advocacy. So how much would you say a G2 review is worth? Let's say $10. Okay, cool. We're putting that in the calculator. How much is a case study worth? How much is a referral worth? How much is a social media post? And all of the, whatever you can think of that is going to touch a customer advocacy program, you assign a value to, and then you run that calculator in the background. And even if it's not going to show up as real money in your balance sheet, you're at least demonstrating this is the value that's created by the action that my customer has taken in these programs.
Yeah. And I think we like that approach, and even further, right? Sales owns that target. Mm-hmm. That's why a lot of sales personnel get chopped, right? Like they don't reach a target. They have a very, very clear measurement of success in customer relationship. Relationship metric is a lot harder to define when we technically don't own that piece. So customer success, did they retain? Did they not retain? It's a pretty clear metric. Ours touches so many different pieces, which is good and bad, because in one way, what's difficult for us is we don't own any one specific metric, like Deena mentioned. However, we do play a role in so many different metrics as well. But fighting for that space, or like we said, building that awareness of where we are actually helping to move the needle, we've seen a lot of progress, I would say, in the last couple of years, but really just in the last couple of years of being able to say, hey, when people touch my programs, typically we can see this type of increase in retention, or this many dollars is actively engaged, and we as people are actively engaged, account managing to some degree this many people. So we're putting some dollars and cents to it, which do tend to make a little bit more sense for the business. However, of course, it's a lot of chicken and egg. There's a lot of still to our practice. Well, are they in the community because they already loved the product, or are they in the community because of the value of the community? I think both, right? So it's very hard sometimes to parse out exactly what customer marketing owns. But I do think we are getting a bit better at defining some of the value that actually impacts the business to the table. And we just need to keep going, and we need to keep going further. And I think to the point here, scale is an issue. And we have been a practice where, okay, you do touch, and there's been products where now we can scale and we can touch more customers, but it is still a piece of the customer base. Whereas every sales transaction comes through sales. Every customer, typically, unless you have on-prem, it is touching the customer success team. So customer marketing, hopefully is touching the customer, all of the customer base to some degree. But I think it's still who interacts with us is still those people who choose to interact with us, who tend to be just a segment of the customer base. So how
Yep.
can we as a practice go much further, diving into engaging across the entire customer base to expand the role so we can see larger numbers, so we can see and report on larger impact to the organization?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, a big part of that, just because of the scope and scale that community can hit with certain accounts, is you're creating a stronger relationship and a deeper set of purchase with that account. Because when you take a look at your CSMs are typically only working with maybe one or two contacts per account.
Mhm.
Your community could be potentially reaching tens of thousands of people from that same account. And so if there's something going on with that account that they're unhappy, or there's a feature that they need, or any of those warning signs, you're much more likely to see that bubble up through community activity than you are if you happen to be lucky enough to be that one person who the CSM is talking to let them know that there's something going on.
Mm.
So it gives you a lot of really good early notification, not only of who your advocates might be and to really help you get across the line for that renewal, but it also helps give you those warning signs where you might need to triage something, whereas other people in the organization just aren't going to be aware because their view of who they get to interact with that account is so narrow.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I love that point, And again, like more of this kind of storytelling. And I guess to back up your point, Lauren, that's not necessarily something a junior person would even know how to think through or present as additional value to it. So, hey, no issue with junior people, and I actually think some junior people are great communicators inside of communities. They can tend to bring a lot of life and energy that maybe someone who's been in the field longer has lost. But agree that throwing someone onto community or advocacy as a leader or owner of it is probably, as we've discussed, with so many intricacies, so many nuances, so much difficulty to this role, is probably setting them up to fail to some degree. So why don't we do this as we get near our time here? So we've talked about all these aspects of what goes into the customer marketing or community role, right? There's the internal buy-in. There's understanding how you can measure the value of your program. There is the long-term relationship building, both internally and externally. There is looking for those KPIs that are cross-functional and saying and being able to lift your voice, have confidence, and go forward. Okay, so this is a very nuanced type of role. What are the risks, though, of hiring someone? Maybe risk reward, because we can't just say there's just risk, but what's the risk reward of hiring, so letting someone go who has had more experience in this but is more costly, versus bringing in someone new who is going to save a lot of money, maybe some fresh perspective, but has not had much tenure and is not very senior in their approach yet?
Yeah. I'd say the biggest difference is that a less experienced person is more likely to do what is immediately in front of them and wait for instructions. And when you're in a type of role that is often fairly siloed and usually a very small department, what's really needed in order for a community to grow and thrive is to someone who has that confidence to be able to not say, okay, tell me what I need to do next. It's here's where we are. Here's what I need from you, and you. So that way we can do what needs to be done next. And here's what that is. It's not just about creating content day to day, which, by the way, is infinitely harder if you're a silo and you're not getting that input from your cross-functional departments, because then it's all on you to create all the content. And how do you know if what you're putting out in front of customers is going to be what they need in order to grow in their role if you're not talking to all these other people? But it's all about being able to demonstrate the value of the community to your community members. And it goes so much more beyond just creating little snippets of content and social media sharing. It's really having that full holistic understanding of all of the different intricacies of the relationships, both internally within your organization and externally with your customers, and to be able to recognize the dots that are invisible and connecting those invisible dots to not only figure out what do I need to do now, but what's going to come next. Because usually there's no one else in your organization that's going to have the expertise or to be able to tell you what's to do next, because they're going to be relying on you.
I think one of the risks too of a less senior resource could be that actually the risk to the leader is that more execution oriented resource will do exactly what the leader says to do.
Exactly. They will do what they're told. They're not going to be able
Yeah.
to make recommendations of what needs to be done.
And I think as a leader, we do know that we want people who can say and have enough experience to say that is not the direction we should go, or to challenge us to some degree, so that we don't, just because we only have our limited human experiences, we don't accidentally go down paths just because that's the only path that we know or the only one that makes sense. We want those voices to be heard that can tell us, oh wait, there's a better way to do this, or I think we could go about it in a different way. So yes, absolutely. We can obviously hire people who will kind of execute, mark, and check all the boxes. But does someone bring vision to the table? Does someone bring even a differing, opposing opinion to the table, which is so important as we think about how to engage our customer base?
Oh my gosh, early in my career, I would be terrified to tell an executive no. That was never an option on the table. It was yes, I will, you ask me to jump, I tell you, how high do you want it? all I want to do is do a good job. And yeah, it would never have occurred to me to push back. And I think it takes the confidence and the experience of knowing what you're talking about to be able to actually look someone up who may be higher up the chain and say, listen, I very much respect you and what you're doing, but here's why what you're suggesting is going down the wrong path, and here's why.
Yes, it does take time to do that. I want to just wrap up with this then. So what is it? So what's our message maybe to leaders? What's our message maybe to people who have been in this practice for a while and are still fighting to get that seat at the table, or to be seen as a necessary versus a nice to have? So Deena, I want to start with you, and then Lauren, I'm going to let you wrap up with your final thoughts.
Yeah.
I think to be seen as a necessary and not a nice to have is to make sure that you're well embedded in other functions. The word silo has come up again, and it tends to be kind of a common theme when we talk about customer advocacy, and it is, showing that the work that you do does have an impact on other functions. And I think that part of the success is embracing the fact that our metrics are shared and trying to drive that point home, instead of, for the last 15 years, trying to find a way to show the value to the organization of the value that we're driving. I think that the answer here for customer advocacy is to show how you are a connector, and how the work that you're doing is helping to drive success here, 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 and here across the business. That makes customer advocacy very unique inside the organization.
Yeah, I love that. Lauren, any last words for marketing leaders or customer advocacy and community professionals?
Yeah. I love what you said, Deena. I'm 100% in agreement with that. It's more just customer marketing and advocacy is a different discipline than your top of funnel demand gen. It can't be looked at through the same transactional lens. It's something that requires time and strategy and relationships to build, and you need to give it room to breathe in order to be able to get to those results that you're looking for. And they will get there. But it's not something that can be done in a bubble. It's a community. I mean, just by the definition of community, it is everyone. Everyone has to have skin in the game for a community to thrive. And it shouldn't just be the community manager that has personal KPIs for that community's success. There should be, for CSMs, maybe a recruitment goal that X percentage of their accounts need to have someone who's a member of your community. Maybe you need to put a KPI on your product team that X percentage of your innovations for your next iteration of features comes from customer feedback. Just ways that all of these different departments can work together in order to grow the community and help it thrive, and not put it on the shoulders of one person, and certainly not one person who doesn't have the experience to really see the full picture and to connect all of those dots together.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I agree with both of you. There's work to be done on both sides. Agree, Lauren, community by definition is not something that happens overnight. It's just not possible. So I think we're almost, as a practice, looking at two things, like this idea of building relationship and this idea of how we accelerate what other parts of the organization are doing. And there might be room for scale and innovation there. But by definition, long-term relationships, well, those we just know from looking at our own lives, those are not something that can be created quickly. I mean, when it happens, it's magical, but let's be honest, that doesn't happen very often. So
it takes time. There are two things that are really going to play into whether or not your account is going to renew with you. It's, are they getting value, and do they feel valued? Both are reasonably difficult to measure, but you need them both in order to have that customer feel connected enough to not only your product, but your company and your team to want to stay.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that is what makes us unique. We do have this opportunity to layer onto the customer experience and really elevate it, and to build additional relationships that can definitely move the needle, right? And I agree, a lot of us make buying decisions because of just how we feel about the company. That's a huge a huge market differentiator. If you can crack it, it's hard to do, but if you can crack it, it's a huge market differentiator that builds in a whole lot of retention that may not have happened without that level of brand affinity. So we get to play a very special role because brand affinity, the look and feel of your product, the look and feel of your marketing, all of that, that's one thing. But when you actually know somebody person to person, that's quite another thing. Now that isn't extremely scalable. So that is a piece of the practice. And then there's another part of the practice that we are working on maturing, I think, which is scaling to just how do we touch and influence beyond even just one-to-one relationships with these people. And there's still a lot of growth to be done, but I do think that this practice is really integral. And I think a lot of good leaders understand that when it comes to shoving, the buttons and moving, there's a lot of pressure on them. Where can we function without the extra dollars? Unfortunately, we still have a lot more. I just keep coming back to, we still have a lot more of the story to tell.
Yeah.
Because people work in their best interest. So if we're telling the story of their best interest, and we can show that long-term value, even if it's a ways off, if we can paint that vision, then we can bring more people over to the realization of the value that this brings. So hopefully this is an inspiring talk with Lauren to some degree of leaders, if you're out there listening, hopefully the inspiration is, okay, maybe I need to look at this a little bit different and rethink just how strategic of a role and maybe more resourcing that needs to be on this. If you're a customer marketing practitioner, hopefully the inspiration is, what are my stories? Really, what are our stories collectively as a practice, and how are we going to tell them better so that they resonate stronger and they bring more excitement to the organization? So I guess that's our homework. All of us have something to do and a part to play. But Lauren, your part was raising your hand saying, I love this. You came to me months ago and said, I love this topic. I want to talk about it. I'm so riled up and passionate about it. So thank you for sharing your passion with us. We really appreciate that.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone has any questions, of how they would approach this, I think Lauren has thought a lot about this. So if you're trying to think through how you would approach your leaders about some of this, I'm sure Lauren would love a reach out from you on LinkedIn and be happy to take that. But
Absolutely.
we are so thankful to have had you, Lauren. I hope that you go forth and tell many, many more stories.
Thanks, Lauren. Good to see you.
Thanks,
Great.
Lauren.
Bye.